Hi everyone, in this tutorial I'll be talking about how to create a full page HTML slider in 3 different technologies. First I'll create with Vanilla JS, and then Angular, and then ReactJS. So this is the final product. It automatically moves through all the slides, but if the user wants, he can also click each slide and move. The active one is shown in black. So the carousel will be generated with the data that I pass, which makes it dynamic. I will not be using any type of plugins or CSS frameworks like Bootstrap. So the objective is to keep it really lightweight. I will be breaking this video into 3 different parts since each technology is different and will take quite a while to get through. There are so many tutorials out there where you can learn how to create a carousel, but here my focus is not just to teach you how to create a carousel, but also discuss in detail the steps that I take and the fundamental concepts in JavaScript behind these ideas. So naturally, I'll be comparing my development experience with these 3 ways of doing the same thing and discuss what might be suitable in different scenarios. It's meant to be a beginner to medium level tutorial for JavaScript developers, so most of you can follow along. The link to the source code is also attached in the video. I'll be using SCSS to compile my styles rather than writing CSS directly. If you don't know what a CSS is, it's a CSS preprocessor. A CSS preprocessor is a program that lets you generate CSS from the preprocessor's own unique syntax. There are lots of benefits of using a CSS preprocessor, which I'm not going to discuss here, but I'll make sure to leave a link below. I'll be using the same SCSS style sheets for all the 3 technologies, so there won't be a difference there. To compile the SCSS, I'll be using a tool called Preproc. There's a free trial where you can try it for both Mac and Windows. I'll be using Preproc only for the Vanilla JS version of the slider. For Angular and React, they already have built-in tooling to compile a CSS to CSS. So I won't be needing Preproc. So to start off, I'll explain the project structure. I have a folder called Vanilla JS, and inside that I have my index file. Index file is right now bare minimum. I have a title, I have a reference to the fonts I want, I have a reference to my style sheet, and also a reference to my carousel style sheet. Then I have an empty body. This is where my carousel HTML will go, and then this is where my logic will go. Right now it's empty. So other than that, there's an images folder, and within that there's a slider folder, and then here are the images. So if you notice, even though my styles are written in SCSS, I reference here saying CSS because the browser doesn't understand what SCSS is. So we need the preprocessor. So I'll show you how to run the preprocessor. You have to open your project like this, add project, and you can follow the steps. And then once that is activated, whenever we change this and save, it will automatically compile that down to CSS. So this is the file where we reference here. Same thing with this. So styles.css is bare minimum. It has a margin 0 given the font family and font size. Now let's move back into the index.js and add the carousel. So this is how the carousel will look like. I'll make sure the indentation is proper. And let's run it. So this is without any JavaScript. And as you can see, it overflows. So there's a main container saying carousel, and within that there is a div called pages with the ID of pages. Within that, these are the pages. So I'll go one by one, and then at the end, this is the pagination. So if you have a class called active, that will be highlighted in black over here. So let's see the first page. So the first page has a class called text container, and then what this animate sliding left does is, when the page is refreshed, you can see there's a nice animation, and then there is h3, which is this, and then h1, which is this, and then explore now button, and this is the image. So all these styles are given in this. So I will not be explaining what these styles are for now. So this is the pagination style. This is the slide in left. There is also a slide in right animation. This is for the second page. If you go to the second page, this content is in the right side. So that's why. And then the third one, once again, it's in the left side. So it's pretty simple. But right now, this doesn't do anything. Now we have to use JavaScript in order to make this function like a real carousel. And also, this should not be overflowing when the user scrolls. So this should be hidden. You can see the preprocess ran again. So now what we have to do is, we have to take this out of here and also this out of here, because this is all dynamic data. This should be controlled with the data that I spoke about earlier. And now let's go back to the carousel.js and write the logic for our slide. First, I'm going to create an array of objects called pages. And with this, I'm going to generate the HTML. I'm going to have two variables there. Then I'm going to loop through this array. And for each iteration, I'll be adding one element for the slider and one element for the pagination. As you can see, I'm not replacing the content which is already there, I'm adding to it. One advantage we have by using template literals is we can have placeholders like this. You put a $mark and curly braces, and then for each iteration, which is called page, I'm accessing what is inside it. So this first iteration heading will be summer 2020, and then second iteration heading will be new season, like that it goes. And then I'm changing the image. First it will be image 1, and then it will be image 2, and then it will be image 3. And also I'm adding the classes here. I'm having a class list here. So what happens is I'm putting a join. So this array will be converted into a string with a space in between. And also for the pagination, I'm adding an ID here and also the class. And here I'm having a tertiary operator. If the page is active, I'm adding the active class. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to directly access these IDs and then add these HTML elements. But the problem is we are not using jQuery. Since we are not using jQuery, this is not identified, this $. So what this means is, every time the developer writes dollar and then gives a string which will be a ID, it's gonna return document.getElementById. So what this means is it's the same thing as this. So this is a much shorter way to write. So let's see whether this works. So there's no content here. So now we are going to generate the slider. This function will have to be invoked. We can do it here. Let's see whether it works. Yes. So the first page is working. Obviously we can't go to the next pages because the logic is not written, but we're going to do it right now. So now we're going to write a function that changes the page every time the user clicks on one of those buttons down. So I'm going to have a function called change page, and I pass a parameter called page number. And again, I'm going to loop through my pages. And then every time I loop through this page, I'm setting the active property to true or false if the page number is equal to the page number of the current iteration. I pass it as true, or I pass it as false. So, and then I'm having an empty variable here, empty array called slider classes, and I'm checking if the page number is equal to the current iteration page number, and whether it's an odd number. Then if it's an odd number, if it's an even number, then I'm adding these two classes. Animate slide in right. That means if it's this object, I'm adding these two classes. If otherwise, normally what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the animate slide in right class, and then at the end I'm going to assign these classes into the current iteration classes attribute. After that, I'm gonna call generate slider again because all these values are changed, the classes and what is active. So it will regenerate this slider, and also regenerating it is not enough. We have to scroll to the position we need. For example, if we need to go to the second page, we have to scroll to that position. So how we do that is we have to get the scroll left position of the pages element, and we have to assign a new value. So we first we have to get the width of the pages. That means the width of this into the page number. So if the page number is 2, let's say this is 1000 pixels, 1000 pixels into 2, which is 2000 pixels, minus 1000 pixels again. So we have to scroll left 1000 pixels. So it makes sense. Right now, if you're in page 1, scroll left should be 0 pixels. If you're in page 2, scroll left should be 1000 pixels. If you're in page 3, let's say page 3 comes here, so it'll be 1000 pixels, for example, into 3, which is 3000 pixels, minus 1000 pixels. So you scroll left 2000 pixels. So let's see whether this works. It doesn't work because even though we wrote this function, we never called it. So we have to have an on-click value here. And we have to call this function. something. Oh yeah, and pass the current page number. So we put the placeholder here, page.number. Save it, see whether it works, refresh. Yeah. So you can see even the animations are working correctly. Now if you're thinking how it scrolls smoothly like this, the reason is because of these styles. I've given a scroll behavior smooth and ease in with 1 second. Now what we have to do is we have to make it change automatically. Even if the user doesn't click, it should autoplay. For this, I'm going to create a function called autoplay, and whenever this function is called, I'm going to get the active page. That means if the second page is active, it'll be true here and this will be false. So it gets the index of that object and then adds 1. So this means this index is 0, this index is 1. So if I add 1 to that, it will become 2. So that's why I'm adding 1 here. So that is the current page. And then the current page, if the length is equal to pages.length, what this means is, let's say we are in page 3. So there is you can't go to page 4, right? So we have to, if you're in page 3, there is no going to page 4. We have to go back to page 1. So what we are doing is telling it to go to 1. If it's not equal to the amount of pages, we are saying to add 1. So what this means is change page, current page, add 1. That means if you're in page 1, the next page is page 2. So if you go to page 2, if you're in page 2, add 1, it will go to page 3. Now, when this function is called, the current page is page 3, which is also equal to the number of pages, so it will go to page 1 again. So it will go on looping like that. But how do we call this? Now we have to use set interval. So let's go up here, and I'm having a timer, and then I'm gonna set the interval with a duration of 5000 milliseconds. This is a constant, and then in that set interval, I'm calling this function autoplay. So what happens is when the page runs, this autoplay gets called. After 5000 milliseconds, this function runs. So this should work right now. So after 5000 milliseconds, it goes to the next page. But there's a slight problem here. The thing is, when it automatically goes to the next page, if the user clicks here, see, the timer doesn't reset. So what I want is, if the user clicks, I want the timer to reset. So how I do that is, when I'm calling the change page, after this, I'm going to reset the time. So this variable here called timer, this, I'm going to reset it. So how I do that is, I call clear interval. This is a native method. And then I'm going to set the interval again. So now it should work properly. So see, even if I'm staying for a while and going to the next page, it's not going to run immediately after this. So because it resets the time. Now everything works as intended, but there are a few things we can do to improve the application. One thing is we are polluting the global scope. What I mean by that is these constants and these functions are available even outside this script. So I can prove that. So if I refresh this, see, so if you're making a really big application, this is not a really good thing. So how we can prevent that is we need to scope all these things into this JS file alone. So to do that, we can use something called an IFI. What IFI means is immediately invoked function invocation. So how to do that is do that. And we wrap this whole thing with the IFI. Make sure the indentation is right. Yeah. Now, see, it's not recognized. So now we are not polluting the global scope, but now we have another issue at hand. If we try to click here, it gives an error. The reason is the change page function is inside the IFI. So whatever here cannot access that. So without writing an on-click like this, so what we can do is after these nav elements are assigned to this page, we can loop the pages array again and we add the on-click directly here and then pass the change page function here. Now we can remove this on-click here. And let's see whether it works. Save the file. Yes, it works. And undo this. So we successfully made a whole slider purely with JavaScript without any plugins or without any CSS frameworks. So it's pretty cool. So what is the advantage of writing everything in pure JavaScript? So if you look into it, the advantages are really impressive. If you go to the network tab and hard reload, you see the carousel is just 2.6 kilobytes. This is even without minification or gzip. And if you see the CSS, we are not using bootstrap or anything like that. So the styles.css is 406 bytes and carousel.css is just 3 kilobytes. So even without minification, let's say you minify and concatenate all this, it will be so fast. So the advantages are really clear. If you're going to put a little bit of extra effort without using a framework like Angular or a library like React, you can make a really fast application. Load times really fast. So this is just the first part. Next, I'll be writing the same application in Angular. And then on part 3, I'll be writing the same application in React using React hooks. So I'll see you soon then. Hope you enjoyed it.